Born from Lack: How Self-Made Millionaires Build Wealth from Nothing. Written, narrated and produced by Audiobook Mantra, a long-form psychological exploration of scarcity, identity, and the architecture of self-made wealth. All rights reserved. Settle in. Let the noise of the world fade. This is the beginning of a different kind of journey. Introduction: the origin of the self-made. Every self-made millionaire has two stories: the story the world sees, and the story that shaped them long before success arrived. The world sees the results, the achievements, the confidence, the wealth. But beneath the surface lies a far quieter origin, a beginning marked by scarcity, confusion, adversity, or abandonment. The self-made are not born with advantage. They are born with lack. Lack of money, lack of opportunity, lack of support, lack of guidance, lack of certainty, lack of identity. Yet within that lack something awakens, a kind of internal fire, a hunger that does not come from desire alone but from necessity. Most people fear lack. They see it as a threat, as something that crushes potential. But the self-made understand a truth that the world rarely acknowledges: lack is the birthplace of innovation, clarity, and transformation. Because when you come from nothing, you develop a relationship with reality that others never experience. You learn to observe yourself. You learn to adapt. You learn to fight quietly in places where others give up loudly. You learn to build not because you want to, but because you must. Scarcity becomes a sculptor. It shapes discipline. It shapes perception. It shapes identity. It shapes the capacity to endure long stretches of invisibility. It shapes the resilience required to act in the future while still trapped in the present. People who grow up in abundance often waste energy, time, and opportunities. People who grow up in lack cannot afford such luxuries. Scarcity introduces clarity, a sharp, painful clarity that reveals what truly matters and what must be done, even when the path is unforgiving. Self-made millionaires are not merely people who became wealthy. They are people who transformed the meaning of lack. They used it as raw material. They converted hardship into discipline. They converted fear into precision. They converted uncertainty into strategy. They converted scarcity into direction. To build wealth from nothing is to transform the self, from someone who reacts to life into someone who sculpts it. This audiobook is not a list of steps. It is an internal blueprint, a deep psychological map of how people rise when circumstances suggest they should remain small. It is about the identity shifts, the behavioral rewiring, and the strategic decisions that separate those who escape the gravity of their beginnings from those who live within it forever. This is the story of the self-made, not the myth, not the highlight reel, the truth beneath it. When you are born from lack, you are not destined for failure. You are positioned for transformation. And what you build from nothing holds a different kind of power, because it was not handed to you. It was carved into existence through clarity, endurance, and psychological evolution. This is how self-made millionaires rise, not by accident, not by luck, but by becoming someone the world cannot ignore. Chapter 1: The Psychology of Beginnings. Why starting from nothing is not a disadvantage. Every story of the self-made begins the same way, with a moment of painful awareness, a moment where a person realizes that the life they were born into cannot be the life they remain in. It is not a dramatic moment. It is not loud. It is not heroic. It is usually quiet, a private confrontation with truth. For some, it happens in a small room with unpaid bills scattered on the table. For others, it happens in their childhood, watching their parents struggle. For others still, it arrives later in life, when they realize no one is coming to save them. But the moment arrives for everyone who eventually rises. A moment when the world becomes brutally honest. A moment when excuses lose their power. A moment when the gravity of their environment becomes undeniable. People often believe that starting from nothing is a weakness, that an empty bank account, a limited education, a turbulent family, or a harsh environment reduces a person's chance of success. But the truth is far more complex and far more dangerous to conventional thinking, because nothing creates hunger like lack. Nothing creates discipline like necessity. Nothing creates clarity like struggle. Nothing builds a self-made mind like early adversity. When you have nothing to fall back on, you are forced to build forward. And that pressure, that internal pressure that nobody else sees, becomes the silent engine that propels the self, made far beyond what comfort could ever create. Those born from lack learn to see the world differently. They do not expect life to be fair. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They do not fantasize about a future handed to them by fate. Instead, they develop a mindset of responsibility long before they develop financial knowledge. They learn to endure discomfort. They learn to resist short-term relief. They learn to face reality without illusion. This psychological foundation becomes the first advantage of starting from nothing, the capacity to survive emotional storms that destroy ordinary people. Comfort creates fragility. Struggle creates resilience. Comfort narrows perception. Struggle sharpens intuition. Comfort rewards hesitation. Struggle requires action. The self-made do not rise because they are extraordinary. They rise because they are conditioned to move when others freeze, to push when others retreat, to fight internally while others collapse externally. Their origin becomes their training, even when they do not realize it at the time. When you begin with nothing, you learn to make decisions without reassurance. You learn to continue despite embarrassment, despite judgment, despite the absence of applause. You learn to build momentum without validation, one of the rarest psychological abilities in the world. People with abundance often require confirmation before moving. People born from lack move because not moving is a greater risk. And so the first truth emerges. Starting from nothing does not weaken you. It hardens you. It makes you self-driven. It makes you self-aware. It makes you self-reliant. It makes you emotionally battle-tested in ways that privilege cannot replicate. The self-made do not rise because of their environment. They rise in spite of it. There is a depth of hunger that comfort cannot produce, a level of discipline that convenience cannot inspire, a seriousness that luxury cannot teach, a fire that only scarcity can spark. This chapter is not about romanticizing struggle. It is about understanding its role, the role it plays in shaping a mind capable of rising far beyond its beginnings. Because wealth is not built on money. Wealth is built on the psychology that emerges when money is absent. When a person confronts their lack without collapsing, something awakens. A new identity forms, one shaped not by what they have, but by what they refuse to accept. That refusal is the birthplace of the self-made, the quiet rebellion against circumstance, the internal declaration that life will not remain as it is, the vow, silent, private, sacred, to build a future that does not resemble the past. From this psychological soil, wealth can grow, slowly at first, invisibly at first, painfully at first, but inevitably, if the mind continues to evolve. This chapter is the foundation, not the techniques, not the strategies, not the financial frameworks, but the inner shift that makes all of those tools relevant. Before a person can build wealth, they must build themselves. Before they can escape their environment, they must escape the identity that environment taught them. Before they can create abundance, they must break the mental loyalty to scarcity. Only then does the journey truly begin. Chapter 2. The hunger to rise. Why desperation becomes the fuel of the self-made. There is a kind of hunger that cannot be taught. A hunger that does not come from dreams, or ambition, or inspiration videos. A hunger that is not loud, not glamorous, not poetic. It is the hunger of a person who looks at their life and realizes, with painful clarity, that staying where they are is no longer an option. This hunger is the secret engine behind the self-made. Most people believe the self-made rise because they want to be rich, but wanting is weak. Wanting collapses under fear. Wanting dissolves under pressure. Wanting disappears when obstacles appear. The self-made do not rise because they want. They rise because they must. Necessity creates a deeper drive than desire ever could. When the consequences of staying the same become unbearable, something fundamental shifts in the psyche. A person no longer pursues change as a luxury. They pursue it as survival. This is the psychological difference between ambition and hunger. Ambition is optional. Hunger is mandatory. People born from lack develop this hunger early, long before they understand its usefulness. It forms in moments of humiliation, when life exposes their limitations. It forms in moments of disappointment, when they watch others receive opportunities that were never available to them. It forms in moments of quiet frustration, when they realize the world is not built to rescue them, and it forms in silence, in the long, sleepless nights when the future feels heavy, dark, and uncertain. It is in those moments that hunger grows. Hunger is not just wanting more. Hunger is refusing to remain who you currently are. It is the internal rejection of stagnation. It is the psychological revolt against mediocrity. It is the invisible rage at the life handed to you. It is the instinct to break out, break up, or break through, whichever comes first. Other people sleep peacefully because they have cushions, support systems, or safety nets. But the self-made sleep with a knot in their chest, a reminder that their life depends on their ability to grow. This is why the self-made move differently. They do not wait for the perfect idea. They do not need external encouragement. They do not need validation. They do not wait for permission. Hunger creates its own permission. It creates its own momentum. It creates its own clarity. People often say, "I am trying my best." But the truth is that most people have never truly reached their limit. They are not pushed far enough. They are not hungry enough. They have too many options, too many distractions, too many soft places to land. But the person born from lack has few options, no distractions, and no softness in the structure of their life. This creates intensity, the intensity to move forward even when progress is invisible, even when motivation is absent, even when exhaustion is overwhelming. Hunger does not negotiate, it commands. And this command leads to a new behavior, the willingness to do what others avoid. When you have nothing, embarrassment becomes irrelevant, rejection becomes normal, failure becomes routine, uncertainty becomes familiar. The self-made learn to operate in emotional environments that break the average person. They grow comfortable making decisions without knowing if they will work. They grow comfortable taking steps without seeing the entire path. They grow comfortable being misunderstood, doubted, and dismissed. Because hunger is not discouraged by obstacles, it is sharpened by them. Every no, every setback, every closed door becomes fuel, not motivation, fuel. Motivation comes and goes. Fuel burns whether you feel inspired or not. The self-made are not powered by excitement. They are powered by refusal. They refuse to remain small. They refuse to be trapped by their past. They refuse to die inside the circumstances that created them. This refusal becomes the backbone of their rise. It pushes them to study when others scroll. It pushes them to build when others sleep. It pushes them to prepare when others procrastinate. It pushes them to take risks when others cling to safety. And eventually, slowly at first, and then all at once, this hunger shapes identity. A person begins to see themselves differently, not as someone born from lack, but as someone rising from it. The world teaches most people to avoid hunger, to numb it with entertainment, distraction, and instant pleasure. But the self-made protect their hunger. They feed it with discipline. They channel it into action. They let it burn away their old limitations. Their hunger becomes their advantage, an advantage that cannot be bought, taught, or inherited, an advantage that turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. Because when a person is truly hungry for transformation, wealth is no longer a dream. It becomes a direction they walk toward every day regardless of mood, fear, doubt, or difficulty. And that direction, sustained long enough, becomes destiny. Chapter 3. The Shift from Survival to Strategy. How Self-Made Millionaires Learn to Think Differently. Every journey out of poverty begins in the same psychological location, survival mode, a mental state where your thoughts circle around immediate needs, where decisions are shaped by the pressure of the present moment, and where the future feels too distant to matter. Survival mode is not a flaw. It is a natural response to scarcity. It sharpens instincts, tightens focus, and forces action. But survival mode also creates a ceiling, one that becomes invisible if you stay in it too long. And this is where most people remain trapped. They are not incapable. They are not lazy. They are not unintelligent. They are simply locked in a mental loop where every decision is reactive, every choice is defensive, and every thought is anchored in the urgency of now. Self-made millionaires do not escape poverty by luck. They escape it by undergoing a psychological shift that few people ever experience consciously. The shift from survival thinking to strategic thinking. This shift does not happen quickly. It does not happen comfortably. It does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, painfully, over years, until the mind that once fought to survive becomes the mind that begins to build. There is always a moment, not dramatic, but deeply personal, where a person realizes that survival is not enough. A moment when the thought appears, if I keep thinking like this, I will never rise. That moment is the beginning of transformation. In survival mode, decisions are made to avoid loss. In strategy mode, decisions are made to create gain. In survival mode, the future feels threatening. In strategy mode, the future becomes an asset. In survival mode, money is something fragile. In strategy mode, money becomes a tool. When a person is born from lack, they develop a kind of hyper-awareness, an ability to feel the weight of every choice. This awareness is painful, but it becomes the raw material of high-level thinking, because strategic thinking is nothing more than awareness extended forward in time. The self-made rise not because they escape pressure, but because they learn to think beyond it. There is a point in every self-made person's life where they begin to observe themselves. They start asking questions that most people avoid. Why do I react this way? Why do I panic when money comes? Why do I sabotage myself when I make progress? Why do I settle when I know I could rise? These questions become the early architecture of strategy, because strategy is not intelligence, strategy is consciousness. The self-made begin to separate emotion from decision, not by suppressing emotion but by understanding it. They begin to recognize the difference between fear and caution, between impulse and instinct, between pressure and priority. They learn that fear is not a signal to stop. Fear is a signal to look more carefully. They learn that discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is growth in disguise. This psychological separation creates space, and in that space, strategy is born. As survival mode fades, something extraordinary happens. The mind begins to consider the long term. A person who once thought only in days begins thinking in months. A person who once thought in months begins thinking in years. A person who once wanted immediate relief begins wanting long-term stability. This time expansion is the true birth of wealth, because wealth is always built by those who think in timelines longer than their emotions. In this stage, the self-made begin making decisions based not on what feels good, but on what builds power. They study patterns instead of moments. They observe consequences instead of temptations. They chase knowledge instead of entertainment. Their curiosity shifts. Instead of asking, how do I survive this week? They begin asking, how do I position myself for 5 years from now? This is the moment they break away from the world around them. Not financially, psychologically, because most people never reach this stage of thinking. They spend their whole lives solving the same small problems, repeating the same emotional cycles, living within the same mental boundaries. The self-made begin to see their environment with sharp clarity. They realize the people around them are not thinking ahead. They realize their neighborhood, workplace, or circle is stuck in survival conversations. They realize mediocrity is contagious. And slowly they begin distancing themselves from the patterns that once felt normal. This distance is not arrogance, it is necessity. A person cannot think strategically while staying immersed in environments that reward stagnation. They must step outside, even if only mentally at first. They must create psychological space where new thinking can exist. This stage is lonely. It must be. Strategic thinking is born in solitude, in hours of reflection, in the quiet examination of one's failures, in the private admission of one's desires. The self-made learn to make decisions that their current environment cannot understand. They invest when others hold back. They learn skills others find unnecessary. They sacrifice comforts others cling to. They make moves that have no immediate reward, because the reward they seek lives far beyond the horizon. This is why so many self-made millionaires appear lucky. Luck is simply the moment when long-term thinking collides with opportunity. But opportunity only appears to those who have created the mental space to see it. The psychological shift from survival to strategy is the first real step out of poverty. It is the transformation of identity. It is the slow construction of a mind capable of wealth, not from privilege, but from awareness. And once this shift happens, The person who emerges is no longer the person who began. They are calmer, they are sharper, they are more deliberate. They no longer react, they respond. They no longer depend on conditions, they depend on themselves. They no longer seek escape, they seek advantage. Once the mind learns to think strategically, wealth stops being a fantasy. It becomes inevitable. Chapter 4. The first breakthrough skill value, and the moment a life begins to shift. Every self-made journey eventually reaches a turning point, a moment that does not look like a breakthrough from the outside, but becomes the quiet pivot of an entire life. It is never a lottery ticket moment. It is never a sudden miracle. It is a realization so subtle that most people overlook it their entire lives. To rise from nothing, you must become valuable. That sentence sounds simple, but for someone born from lack, it carries tremendous weight. Because lack convinces people that the world controls them, value reveals that they can control their place in the world. This shift from seeing life as something that happens to you to seeing life as something you can shape through skill is the true beginning of upward mobility. Not when money increases, not when opportunities appear, but when capability becomes the priority. A person trapped in survival thinks, "I need money." A person ready to rise thinks, "I need skill." Money is a result. Skill is the cause. Most people never experience this psychological shift because they are trained to chase income, not ability. They ask how to earn more before asking how to become more. They search for shortcuts while ignoring the one truth that every self-made millionaire eventually discovers: you do not get paid for your time, you get paid for your usefulness. When someone born from lack internalizes this truth, something changes in their posture. They stop looking at their environment as a prison and begin looking at themselves as the key. Their attention moves inward, toward the skills they can sharpen, the habits they can build, the capacities they can strengthen. They stop waiting for the world to open doors and begin building doors of their own. This psychological transition is the first real breakthrough. It is the moment where destiny shifts from accidental to intentional. The self-made begin noticing patterns. They see that wealthy people are not simply lucky, they are useful, not in a shallow sense, but in a deep economic and psychological sense. They solve important problems. They hold rare skills. They operate with discipline. They think independently. They have capabilities that society consistently rewards. And so the self-made begin building themselves from the inside out. They study while others relax. They practice while others postpone. They observe while others complain. They learn to master the boring parts of progress: repetition, patience, focus, incremental improvement. This mastery of boredom is a hidden advantage, because most people cannot endure the slow, dull grind of skill development. They want excitement. They want novelty. They want quick validation. But skills do not grow in excitement. They grow in repetition. Every self-made millionaire you admire has a period in their life that was invisible to everyone else. A period where they invested time, energy, and discipline into becoming someone more capable than their circumstances suggested. A period where they gained no recognition but gained something far more valuable: leverage. Skill is leverage. Competence is leverage. Discipline is leverage. Consistency is leverage. When you gain skill, the world cannot keep you small, not forever, because skill creates value, and value creates movement. Opportunities that once ignored you begin to notice you. People who once doubted you begin to respect you. Doors that once felt locked begin to loosen. The world rarely resists competence for long. But the true beauty of skill is not external, it is internal. As a person gains capability, they also gain confidence. Not the fragile confidence of ego, but the steady confidence of competence. The kind of confidence that grows quietly, like a tree developing roots, deep, invisible, unshakable. This internal confidence begins altering identity. A person who once felt powerless begins feeling capable. A person who once felt trapped begins feeling strategic. A person who once believed life was against them begins believing life can be shaped. And in this shift, something profound happens. The self-made begin setting higher standards for themselves, not because someone forced them, but because the person they are becoming can no longer tolerate the habits of who they used to be. They start waking up earlier. They start organizing their finances. They start caring about discipline. They start reading, learning, seeking knowledge. They start moving differently, thinking differently, speaking differently. They begin expecting more from themselves than anyone else expects of them. This is the true beginning of wealth, when the internal standard rises, when identity begins pulling a person forward instead of circumstance dragging them backward. Skill becomes the bridge between who they were and who they are becoming. Value becomes the magnet that draws opportunity. Discipline becomes the engine that drives consistency. Identity becomes the compass that directs their rise. And these four forces, skill, value, discipline, identity, begin working together silently, shifting a person's trajectory long before money shows any sign of increasing. Most people believe the self-made rise because they find the right opportunity. But that is not true. Opportunities do not appear randomly. They appear when someone becomes the kind of person who can see them, seize them, and sustain them. The first breakthrough is not financial. It is psychological. It is the moment you stop chasing money and start building the self that money eventually chases. This shift is the quiet turning point of every self-made life. It is invisible to the world, but undeniable to the person experiencing it. It is the beginning of the ascent, not upward, but inward. And once this shift happens, the rest of the journey becomes possible. Chapter 5. The Long Game. How patience, time, and compounding become the real engine of self-made wealth. There comes a moment in every self-made journey when the individual realizes that wealth is not built in the speed of emotion, but in the rhythm of time. It is here that the mindset of the self-made begins to diverge sharply from the mindset of the world around them. While most people chase urgency, the self-made begin to understand the quiet, underestimated force that actually builds wealth. The long game. The long game is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is not a highlight reel. It is a discipline of seeing further than your impulses allow, of acting in the present with respect for the future, and of choosing decisions that take years to reward you instead of minutes. Most people cannot do this, not because they lack intelligence, but because their relationship with time has never evolved beyond survival. When you grow up surrounded by lack, time feels like an enemy. The future feels uncertain. The present feels heavy. You learn to seek immediate relief because everything around you teaches urgency. But when a person begins to rise, their relationship with time must transform. The future can no longer be a vague idea. It must become an ally, a tool, a horizon that informs your behaviors today. And this psychological shift is one of the rarest in the world. The self-made learn early that wealth is not the product of intensity, it is the product of duration. Anyone can be disciplined for a week. Anyone can be motivated for a moment. Anyone can commit to improvement when life feels fresh and exciting. But wealth does not respond to moments. It responds to patterns. There is a discipline required to stay committed long after the world stops applauding, long after motivation fades, long after comfort becomes tempting. This kind of discipline is not about willpower. It is about identity. You become the long game. You do not wait to feel committed. Commitment becomes the kind of person you are. People born from lack often have an unexpected advantage. They understand how to endure. They have lived through long periods of uncertainty. They have survived environments where nothing came quickly or easily. They have experienced stretches of adversity that would break most people. That endurance, when redirected, becomes one of the most powerful forces in wealth building. Compounding is the financial expression of patience. But compounding is much more than mathematics. Compounding is a philosophy. It is the idea that consistency outruns intensity, that small habits repeated daily accumulate into something extraordinary, that each day builds on the last, that each decision, no matter how small, shifts the trajectory of your life. People without patience never see the results of compounding because they quit during the invisible phase, the phase where effort is high and reward is low. Every self-made person has endured this phase. It is the part of the journey where everything feels unfair, where progress is microscopic, where habits test your resolve, where you question whether any of it matters. And it is precisely here that the majority of people fall away. The self-made survive this phase because their hunger is stronger than their impatience. They understand that the early stages of growth are always silent. The seed grows underground before it ever breaks the surface. The foundation is built long before the structure is visible. The future rewards only those who remain long enough to meet it. The long game requires emotional maturity, the ability to resist comparing yourself to others, the ability to stay focused while others rush, the ability to choose growth while others choose distraction. This maturity is not taught in school. It is built in struggle. It is shaped by nights of self-doubt and mornings of recommitment. It is the quiet resilience of someone who has learned not to expect shortcuts. Time becomes the self-made person's greatest partner. They stop trying to outrun it. They begin building with it. They invest early, even if the amounts are small. They improve daily, even if the progress is slight. They choose consistency over chaos. They choose direction over speed. They choose habits over impulses. And slowly, the world begins to respond. What once felt impossible becomes inevitable. What once felt distant becomes reachable. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. This is the nature of compounding. It rewards the patient disproportionately, and the impatient not at all. The long game also requires saying no, not only to distractions, but to people who do not think in years. The self-made often find themselves alone during this stage, not because they push people away, but because their time horizon makes casual thinking feel foreign. Where others see shortcuts, they see traps. Where others see quick wins, they see long-term losses. Where others seek excitement, they seek alignment. Patience becomes their competitive advantage. Consistency becomes their mastery. Time becomes their leverage. When the long game takes hold in a person, wealth stops being chaotic and begins being predictable. Not easy, but predictable. Because the habits they built today become the stability they live with tomorrow. Their identity becomes their insurance policy. Their discipline becomes their safety net. Their patience becomes their momentum. This is the true wealth of the self-made, not the money they eventually acquire, but the person they become on the path toward it. A person who thinks in years. A person who sees beyond distractions. A person who builds for a future they cannot yet touch. A person who no longer fears the long road, because they have learned to walk it with dignity and focus. Most people want wealth quickly because they fear the time it takes. The self-made embrace time because they understand that every year of patience compounds into a decade of freedom. That is the long game, the one most will never play, the one few will ever master, the one that quietly shapes the destiny of those determined to rise from nothing. Chapter 6. The Power of Positioning. How the self-made escape the gravity of their environment. Every rise begins with a quiet betrayal, the betrayal of the environment that shaped you, not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because no one rises until they realize that their environment is not simply where they live. It is the invisible architecture shaping how they think, how they speak, how they react, and what they believe is possible. People born from lack often grow up surrounded by resignation. Resignation disguised as realism. Resignation disguised as humility. Resignation disguised as just being practical. Yet what looks like practicality is often inherited limitation. What looks like realism is often recycled fear. What looks like familiarity is often quiet imprisonment. The self-made are not the ones who hate their environment. They are the ones who wake up from it. The waking up is never dramatic. It often begins with a simple realization: if I absorb the beliefs around me, I will become the results around me. This realization is painful because it forces a person to confront a truth that most avoid for a lifetime, that their environment is not passive. It is a teacher, it is a mirror, it is a ceiling, and unless they step outside of its gravitational pull, their life will follow the same trajectory as everyone who remains inside it. Gravity is invisible, but its influence is absolute. So is the influence of an environment. Most people underestimate how deeply they are shaped by those around them. You do not simply pick up habits from your environment. You inherit expectations. You inherit standards. You inherit emotional responses. You inherit limitations that are never questioned because they are shared by everyone you know. This is why people born from lack often remain in lack, not because they lack potential, but because they inherit an internal map that keeps them from exploring beyond their familiar boundaries. The self-made break this map, not through rebellion, but through awareness, not through arrogance, but through clarity. They begin to notice things others never question. Why does everyone around me think short-term? Why does everyone around me settle for the first opportunity? Why does everyone around me avoid discomfort? Why does everyone around me expect so little from themselves? Why does everyone around me glorify struggle instead of escaping it? These questions do not create anger. They create distance, emotional distance first, physical distance later. This distance is essential. A person cannot think differently while being drowned in the expectations of those who think the same. To adopt a new mindset, one must first create mental space for it. To form a new identity, one must detach from the identity that was inherited. To rise, one must create psychological altitude. Positioning begins here, not in wealth, not in strategy, but in the mind that refuses to remain shaped by its surroundings. The self-made understand that environment is not just physical location. Environment is input, what you hear, what you see, what you absorb, what you normalize. Positioning yourself differently begins with changing what you consume mentally, long before you change where you live physically. There is a moment in the self-made journey that feels like isolation, but is actually evolution. A moment where you no longer feel aligned with the conversations around you. People talk about problems, but you think about solutions. People talk about luck, but you think about leverage. People talk about fear, but you think about strategy. People talk about struggle, but you think about escape velocity. This psychological mismatch is the first sign of ascent. As identity expands beyond the limits of the environment, friction appears. People misunderstand you. Some think you changed too quickly. Others assume you are becoming distant. But the truth is simple. You are becoming someone your environment did not prepare you to be. This evolution does not require cutting everyone off. It requires redefining your center of gravity. Instead of letting your environment pull you downward, you anchor yourself to a higher vision. This shift is subtle yet profound. You no longer take emotional instructions from the world around you. You no longer adopt their pace. You no longer inherit their urgency. You no longer internalize their fears. You begin to make decisions based on who you are becoming, not who you used to be. This is positioning, not external positioning, internal positioning. The positioning of identity, of intention, of trajectory. When the self-made reposition themselves internally, external changes follow naturally. They change how they spend their time. They change what they study. They change the people they seek advice from. They change the skills they prioritize. They change what they tolerate. They change what they pursue. Eventually, this internal repositioning becomes external. New connections develop. New opportunities appear. New environments begin to open. New standards become normal. The world that once felt unreachable begins to feel familiar. The rooms that once intimidated you begin to feel aligned. The goals that once felt impossible begin to feel natural. This is the final truth of positioning. You do not rise into a new environment. You grow into a new identity, and the environment shifts in response. When you are born from lack, escape is not a single moment. It is a series of psychological steps, subtle shifts, quiet decisions, internal realignments. You outgrow the gravity of your environment not by rejecting it, but by transcending it. The world you want will not come to meet you. You must rise into it. And that rise begins by positioning yourself internally above the limits of where you began. Chapter 7. The Invisible Ladder. How Self-Made Millionaires Rise Through Identity, Not Circumstance. Every rise has a ladder, but it is not the ladder the world imagines. Not the corporate ladder, not the social ladder, not the external ladder built from opportunity and connections and privilege. The ladder that the self-made climb is invisible. It exists entirely within the mind, hidden beneath layers of fear, insecurity, self-doubt, and internalized limitations. And most people never climb it, not because they lack capability, but because they never see it. The self-made see it. They sense it long before they understand it. They begin to feel the tension between who they are and who they could become. They feel the weight of their old identity pressing against the edges of their new ambition. They feel the boundaries of their environment clashing with an inner world that refuses to shrink. This chapter is about that tension. The stretching of identity that begins long before wealth appears, long before opportunity opens, long before growth becomes visible. It is about the internal ascent that must occur before any external rise can take place. People often ask how the self-made move up in life. They imagine external pathways, degrees, networks, mentors, lucky breaks. But the true ascent is internal. The ladder is internal. The climb is internal. The first elevation happens not in money, not in environment, but in consciousness. Everything begins with the first rung, awareness. The awareness that the life you were handed is too small for the person you are becoming. The awareness that your thoughts deserve a bigger horizon. The awareness that your potential is suffocating inside your current identity. The awareness that you must become someone new before life can become something new. Most people never experience this awareness for more than a single moment. It flickers and fades. Life distracts them. Fear blinds them. Comfort seduces them. And they return to the familiar gravity of who they have always been. But the self-made hold on to this awareness. They nurture it quietly. They protect it from the opinions of others. They feed it with discipline, curiosity, and self-reflection. It becomes the seed of transformation, small, invisible, underestimated, but eventually unstoppable. The second rung of the invisible ladder is self-respect, not the surface level respect that depends on compliments or praise, but the deep internal respect that comes from choosing your future over your impulses. The self-made develop self-respect not by talking positively to themselves, but by committing to actions that align with the identity they want to become. They wake up on days when motivation is absent. They push forward when no one is watching. They study when no one rewards them. They practice when no one applauds them. And slowly, their actions begin to prove something to themselves that words never could. I can trust myself. Self-respect is the psychological currency of transformation. Without it, a person cannot climb. Without it, identity collapses under pressure. Without it, every plan becomes fragile. The self-made value this currency more than money because it is the foundation on which wealth is eventually built. The third rung is self-direction, the ability to navigate your life without waiting for permission or validation. This is one of the most difficult transitions for someone born from lack, because scarcity environments teach dependence. They teach caution over initiation, obedience over innovation, conformity over creativity. The self-made must unlearn this conditioning before they can rise. They must learn to lead themselves into unfamiliar territory. They must learn to make decisions without reassurance. They must learn to trust their judgment more than their fears. They must learn to act without waiting for approval. This is where the ascent becomes uncomfortable, because stepping into self-direction feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the identity you once lived inside, betrayal of the expectations others had for you, betrayal of the version of yourself that survived through compliance. But it is not betrayal, it is liberation. The old identity is not being abandoned, it is being transcended. The fourth rung is self-definition, the deliberate creation of a new identity. The self-made do not wait for life to redefine them, they redefine themselves intentionally. This does not mean pretending to be wealthy or confident or successful. It means adopting the habits, behaviors, and standards that align with the future they are building. Their self-definition becomes the blueprint of their ascent. They begin to think differently, speak differently, plan differently, move differently. They form an identity that matches their future instead of mirroring their past. At this stage, something remarkable happens. The world begins responding differently, not because the world changed, but because their identity changed. Identity alters perception, and perception alters action, and action alters the opportunities a person notices, pursues, and attracts. The fifth rung is self-permission, the psychological right to rise. This is the point where most people fall, not because they are incapable, but because they feel unworthy. They carry the emotional residue of lack, guilt, shame, self-doubt, smallness, invisibility. They fear outgrowing the identity that kept them safe. They fear rising too far from the familiar. They fear success because it feels like abandoning their origins. They fear abundance because they still feel shaped by scarcity. The self-made overcome this not by rejecting their past, but by reframing it. Their lack becomes their origin story, not their identity. Their hardship becomes their training, not their destiny. Their struggle becomes their fuel, not their limitation. This shift is monumental, the internal permission to rise without apology. The sixth rung is self-elevation, the shift from potential to embodiment. This is where internal transformation becomes external. It is where discipline becomes rhythm, where skill becomes leverage, where consistency becomes momentum, where identity becomes results. This stage is slow, it is quiet, it is unglamorous. It feels like living in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. This is the part of the journey most people never see, the long, invisible climb that takes years, but feels like eternity. But the self-made endure it because they understand something most people never learn. Climbing the invisible ladder is the journey. Wealth is merely the view from the top. The seventh rung, the highest rung, is self-alignment. This is where the self-made become unstoppable, not because they are extraordinary, but because there is no longer any internal conflict within them. Their identity aligns with their ambition, their habits align with their goals, their decisions align with their direction, their discipline aligns with their destiny. Nothing pulls them backward because there is no backward left in them. Nothing distracts them because their focus has become identity. Nothing intimidates them because they do not fear the path. They built the path. At this point, ascent becomes natural. Not easy, but natural. The hard part is behind them, the internal climb. The invisible ladder has only one requirement, that you rise inside before you rise outside. The self-made do this, quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically, and when they finally reach the point where their internal world exceeds the limitations of their past, the external world has no choice but to follow. This is how people born from lack rise, not through luck, not through shortcuts, through an internal evolution that the world cannot see but cannot deny. Chapter 8. The price of transformation. Sacrifice, isolation, and the identity death required to build wealth from nothing. Every self-made journey eventually reaches a point where the person realizes that rising is not simply about building something new. It is about letting something old die, not a physical death, an identity death, a shedding of the version of yourself that was built by survival, shaped by scarcity, and defined by the environment you inherited. This death is subtle. It does not happen in a single moment. It is slow, silent, and psychologically violent. It feels like losing pieces of yourself. But in reality, you are losing only the pieces that were holding you down. You are not destroying who you are. You are dismantling who you were never meant to remain. Most people never rise because they fear this internal death more than they desire external transformation. They hold on to an identity built in lack, hardened by trauma, conditioned by fear. They cling to patterns that feel familiar, even when those patterns are the very chains preventing their ascent. The self-made reach a breaking point where the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of becoming someone else. This is the beginning of transformation, real transformation, the kind that costs you something. Transformation has a price, and everyone pays it. The difference is this: only the self-made are willing to accept the invoice when it arrives. The first cost is comfort, not just physical comfort, psychological comfort, the comfort of old routines, the comfort of familiar stories, the comfort of being understood by everyone around you, the comfort of belonging to a group that demands nothing of you. To rise, you must step into discomfort so consistently that discomfort becomes your new normal. Most people cannot do this because they measure their lives by how comfortable they feel. The self-made measure their lives by how much they grow. The second cost is identity friction. As you begin to change, you will feel the tension between your old self and your new direction. You will notice remnants of your old mindset resisting your progress. You will catch yourself thinking small even as you act big. You will feel the emotional pull of the person you used to be. This tension is not a sign of failure. It is the sign of transformation. Growth is not smooth. Growth is not graceful. Growth is friction. The grinding away of old beliefs, old fears, old insecurities, old habits. The self-made learn to sit inside this friction without running from it. The third cost is relationships, not because the self-made intentionally push people away, but because evolution is incompatible with stagnation. Some people will distance themselves because your growth reminds them of their stillness. Others will try to pull you back because your ambition threatens their comfort. Others will not understand your discipline, your hunger, your standards, your silence. Over time, the self-made realize that the climb is lonely not because they want solitude, but because the altitude changes the conversations they are able to have. The people still living in the world you left behind cannot follow you into the world you are building. And truthfully, you cannot stay with them without sacrificing your ascent. The fourth cost is certainty. To rise from nothing, you must be willing to walk without clarity, without promises, without guarantees. You must take steps into the fog with no confirmation that the ground beneath you will hold. You must make decisions with partial information. You must choose a direction before knowing if it is correct. The self-made do not wait for certainty. Certainty is a luxury they were never given. They build certainty through motion, not hesitation. Every step forward sharpens the direction. Every action clarifies the path. Most people want the map before they walk. The self-made begin walking and build the map along the way. The fifth cost is time. Wealth from nothing does not happen quickly. It happens slowly, invisibly, agonizingly. It happens in years of discipline that create no applause. It happens in seasons of effort that produce no immediate reward. It happens in repetition, in patience, in the refusal to break, when nothing seems to be working. This is the period where most people give up, not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot endure the silence of long-term compounding. They need the dopamine of quick results. They need emotional reassurance. They need visible progress. The self-made learn to love the quiet years because they understand that the world is not ignoring them. It is testing them, testing their endurance, testing their identity, testing their willingness to stay loyal to a future that is not yet visible. The sixth cost is self-confrontation. This is the hardest of all. To rise from nothing, you must confront every part of yourself that prefers safety over progress. You must face the beliefs you inherited as a child. You must face the fears that disguised themselves as logic. You must face the insecurities that dictated your behavior. You must face the excuses that carried you through your past. The self-made do not rise because they are fearless. They rise because they become brutally honest with themselves. They see their flaws without hiding from them. They correct their patterns instead of defending them. They outgrow the versions of themselves that serve survival, but sabotage success. This level of self-confrontation destroys ego, but builds identity. And then comes the final cost. The cost most people avoid their entire lives: the death of the old self. The self who thought small, the self who lived in scarcity, the self who depended on others emotionally, the self who feared growth, the self who sabotaged progress, the self who survived instead of built. This self cannot accompany you into abundance. This self cannot manage wealth. This self cannot create opportunity. This self cannot hold success. This self cannot sustain discipline. So this self must die, not violently but gradually, like a shadow dissolving at dawn. With every disciplined choice, with every skill you learn, with every distraction you eliminate, with every boundary you enforce, with every fear you confront, with every standard you raise. The death of the old self is the birth of the self-made, and from that moment on, the world encounters someone different. Someone who no longer negotiates with their past, someone who no longer apologizes for their ambition, someone who no longer clings to survival, someone who has outgrown the identity they were born into and stepped into the identity they were destined to build. This is transformation. This is reinvention. This is the deepest part of the journey from lack to wealth, the internal metamorphosis that makes the external ascent possible. And once this transformation begins, it cannot be reversed. A person who has glimpsed their higher self cannot unsee it. A person who has tasted their potential cannot return to their old limits. A person who has risen internally will rise externally, inevitably, irreversibly. This chapter marks the moment where the self-made stop surviving their life and begin constructing it. From here forward, the climb accelerates, not because the world becomes easier, but because the person becomes stronger. Chapter 9. The Art of Leverage: How the Self-Made Multiply Time, Money, and Opportunity When They Start With Nothing. Every self-made journey reaches a threshold where effort alone is no longer enough. There is a ceiling to hard work, a limit to hours, a boundary to energy, a maximum capacity to physical output. Most people born from lack never reach this realization, not because they lack ambition, but because they are conditioned to believe that effort is the path, that struggle is the badge of honor, that sweat is the only currency of advancement. But effort without leverage is a treadmill. You can run faster, you can run harder, you can run longer, but the scenery does not change. At some point, the self-made look around and realize that the people above them are not working harder. They are working differently. Their power does not come from intensity. It comes from multiplication. They have discovered the secret that separates the self-made who stay at the lower levels from the self-made who ascend into real abundance. Wealth is not built by effort. Wealth is built by leverage. This realization changes everything, because leverage is the multiplier that turns a single person into a force. It is the architecture that transforms linear progress into exponential growth. It is the invisible machinery behind every empire, every fortune, every legacy. But leverage is not one thing. It is a collection of forces hidden within everyday life, unnoticed by those who are stuck in survival, understood only by those who have climbed far enough to see how the game is really played. The first form of leverage the self-made discover is time distortion. It is the shift from using their own time to multiplying it through systems, habits, and rhythm. At first, their time is fragile, easily hijacked by distraction, urgency, emotion, or other people's needs. But as they evolve, they begin treating time like a currency. They protect it, they schedule it, they defend it, they structure it. Their days become intentional, not reactive. Their hours become investments, not expenses. And slowly, a new kind of time emerges. Time that works for them, time that compounds, time that reinforces their identity, time that builds momentum in the background. This is the first leverage, disciplined time. Then comes the second leverage, skill leverage. A person with no resources must begin with this, because skill is the only form of capital they can afford. Skill is value trapped inside a human being, waiting to be released into the world. When a person acquires rare skill, they no longer trade time for money. They trade ability for opportunity. Their value increases. Their negotiation power strengthens. Their time becomes expensive. Their presence becomes meaningful. This is when the world begins noticing them. But skill alone is not enough. If skill remains trapped inside a single person, its multiplication power is limited. The self-made soon realize that skill must evolve into systems, patterns, and processes that allow their knowledge to operate even when they are not actively applying it. The world sees this as automation. The self-made experience it as liberation. A system is effort crystallized into structure, effort that repeats itself, effort that sustains itself, effort that continues without emotional fluctuations, effort that becomes a machine. The first time a self-made person sees their own system produce results without their immediate involvement, something inside them shifts. They begin to understand what wealthy people have known for centuries. Freedom is not earned by working harder. It is earned by building structures that work for you. This leads to the next leverage, relational leverage. People underestimate how powerful relationships are because they misunderstand what a network really means. A network is not a list of contacts. It is not socializing. It is not exchanging favors. A real network is a constellation of aligned minds, shared opportunities, and complementary strengths. When a self-made person steps into strategic environments, everything changes. They begin learning at speeds that would have taken them decades alone. They begin receiving opportunities that would have remained invisible from below. They begin accessing information that shifts their entire financial trajectory. One powerful connection can compress a decade of struggle into a single conversation. One mentor can correct years of misdirection with a single perspective. One aligned collaboration can multiply income beyond anything possible through isolated effort. This is the leverage of proximity, the multiplier that cannot be purchased, only earned. But the deepest leverage, and the most misunderstood, is psychological leverage. It is the ability to make decisions without emotional sabotage. It is the ability to remain calm while others panic. It is the ability to think long-term while others seek instant relief. It is the ability to delay gratification while others rush to ease discomfort. It is the ability to trust yourself even when no evidence exists yet. Psychological leverage is the invisible advantage of the self-made, because once you master your own mind, every other form of leverage becomes accessible. Without this, systems collapse, opportunities slip, relationships break, habits fail, consistency evaporates. Most people cannot rise not because the path is hidden, but because their own psychology is unprepared for the responsibilities success requires. This is why the self-made spend years strengthening their inner world before the outer world ever reflects it, because they know that leverage without emotional maturity leads not to wealth, but to self-destruction. Once all these forms of leverage converge, time, skill, systems, relationships, and psychology, something extraordinary happens. The person who once came from nothing becomes someone who shapes everything around them. Their effort multiplies through structures. Their knowledge multiplies through impact. Their discipline multiplies through systems. Their relationships multiply through opportunity. Their identity multiplies through alignment. Every decision they make begins to echo outward. Every step they take begins to shift their life upward. Every boundary they enforce strengthens their trajectory. Every year of discipline compounds into decades of freedom. This is the true power of leverage. Not that it makes things easier, but that it makes growth inevitable. The self-made do not rise because they are special. They rise because they learn to multiply what they have, even when what they have is almost nothing. This is the point where trajectories diverge permanently. The average person tries to work harder. The self-made tries to work smarter. The average person looks for opportunities. The self-made builds the capacity to attract them. The average person seeks external validation. The self-made seeks internal alignment. And once leverage takes hold, once multiplication replaces effort, the person born from lack becomes someone unrecognizable even to themselves. They are not just surviving. They are not just building. They are not just rising. They are compounding. And compounding is the closest thing to magic that exists in the real world. Chapter 10. The Ascent. How the self-made lock in wealth, rewrite destiny, and become unstoppable. There comes a stage in every self-made journey where the external rise begins mirroring the internal transformation that has been happening quietly for years. It is a stage most people never reach, not because it requires genius or luck or extraordinary talent, but because it requires becoming someone who refuses to return to who they once were. The ascent is not a moment. It is not a breakthrough. It is not a sudden explosion of success. It is a slow, deliberate, powerful elevation, a rising that begins inside the mind and eventually reshapes the entire trajectory of a life. It is the point where the person who once fought to survive becomes the person who now shapes their own destiny. The world sees this as a transformation of circumstances, but in truth, it is a transformation of identity. The ascent begins when the self-made finally understand that they are no longer the person who started the journey. The fear-driven self has dissolved. The scarcity-driven self has been replaced. The reactive self has given way to the strategic self. The person shaped by lack has evolved into someone who generates abundance from their own internal order. At this point, something profound shifts. Wealth becomes predictable, not because life becomes easier, but because the person has changed so deeply that success is no longer an exception. It becomes a consequence. The ascent is the maturation of every habit, every sacrifice, every discipline, every decision that was once made in silence. Years of internal battles now reveal their external reward. Invisible compounding finally becomes visible. The roots beneath the surface finally break into daylight. But this final stage requires something few people ever learn: the ability to hold wealth. People talk endlessly about how to make money, but almost never about how to keep it, grow it, and steward it. Because rising from nothing creates a new challenge, learning how to live in abundance, while your old identity was shaped in scarcity. The self-made must learn a new kind of emotional intelligence, one rooted not in survival, but in stewardship. They must understand the psychology of stability, the psychology of expansion, the psychology of responsibility. They must learn not to self-sabotage when success arrives. They must learn not to panic when responsibility increases. They must learn not to shrink when they enter unfamiliar environments. They must learn not to chase validation that distracts from their mission. They must learn not to regress into old patterns that once kept them safe but now keep them small. The ascent is the art of holding what you once wished for without collapsing under the weight of your own evolution. And so the self-made begin mastering a new dimension of leverage, emotional control at the highest level. They stop reacting to every fluctuation of life. They stop impulsively changing direction. They stop needing outcomes to feel secure. They stop negotiating with their own weaknesses. They stop letting fear participate in their decision-making. This new stability creates a strange kind of quiet power, a calmness that attracts opportunity, a steadiness that makes others trust them, a confidence that is not loud but undeniable, a presence that communicates capability without a single word. With this calmness, the self-made begin constructing not just income, not just assets, not just success, but permanence. They begin building things that outlive their effort, systems that compound, structures that protect, foundations that do not crumble. This is the moment where wealth stops being temporary and becomes generational, not necessarily because it is passed down automatically, but because the habits, the identity, the psychological frameworks, the internal architecture of the individual now exists independent of circumstance. The ascent is not just financial, it is spiritual, it is psychological, it is intellectual, it is strategic. It is the merging of the old pain with the new power until the pain becomes irrelevant and the power becomes natural. And yet, the ascent still requires one more transformation, perhaps the most important one. The self-made must learn how to operate without the hunger that once drove them. Hunger is a powerful engine, but it is not sustainable forever. Fear of returning to lack is powerful, but eventually it fades. Deep dissatisfaction can push you forward, but it cannot guide you when you are no longer behind. At this stage, the self-made must shift from hunger to purpose, from escaping something to building something, from running away from their past to running toward their potential. This is the final evolution, the transformation from a mind shaped by lack to a mind shaped by vision. Purpose becomes the new engine, legacy becomes the new compass, identity becomes the stabilizing force, discipline becomes second nature, strategy becomes instinct, focus becomes effortless, and wealth becomes the quiet reward of a person who no longer fights to survive, but builds to expand. At this stage, something extraordinary happens. The world begins bending around the individual, instead of the individual bending around the world. Opportunities come to them, connections seek them out. Solutions become obvious, challenges become manageable. Their presence alone opens doors that effort could never open. This is the true meaning of self-made. Not that you built everything alone, but that you built a self capable of everything that followed. And when a person reaches this stage, the stage where who they are internally is stronger than anything they once feared externally, their ascent is complete, not because they have reached the top, but because nothing can pull them back down. They are no longer shaped by lack. They are no longer controlled by fear. They are no longer limited by their past. They are no longer fighting for survival. They are building from abundance. They are expanding through clarity. They are rising through identity. They are living as the person they once needed to become. The world sees wealth, but wealth is only the shadow. The real transformation is the person casting it. And so the self-made ascend, not into privilege, not into luxury, but into sovereignty. The sovereignty of someone who shaped themselves from nothing and became someone the world could not stop. This is the ascent, the final stage, the culmination of everything that began in lack and ended in power. No one is born unstoppable, but anyone can become it. Conclusion: from lack to legacy. The final transformation of the self-made. Every journey begins with a question: can I rise from where I am? Can I change what I was given? Can I rewrite the story I was born into? The self-made discover the truth slowly, painfully, repeatedly. Yes, they can. Not because the world becomes easier, but because they become stronger. This audiobook began in lack, the place where momentum is born, where hunger awakens, where identity is forged in the friction of reality. It traveled through the psychology of survival, the shift into strategy, the building of skill, the endurance of time, the escape from limiting environments, the invisible ladder of identity, the death of the old self, the mastery of leverage, and the final ascent into abundance. And now, here at the end, the journey reveals one final truth. The self-made do not rise because they were chosen. They rise because they chose themselves. The person born from lack carries both a burden and a gift. The burden is the weight of scarcity, of uncertainty, of environments that teach limits. The gift is the hunger that scarcity creates, the fire that comfort cannot produce, the clarity that adversity forces upon the mind. Lack is not the enemy. Lack is the birthplace of transformation. A person born from lack learns to move without guarantees, to build without applause, to grow without permission. They develop the inner discipline that abundance cannot teach. They learn to depend on their own evolution rather than their environment. They learn that the path forward is not made of opportunities, but of identity. Wealth is never the real destination. Wealth is the reflection of a person who has rebuilt themselves from the inside out. Anyone can chase money. Only a few can build the identity that attracts it, sustains it, multiplies it, and grows beyond it. The self-made understand that the true treasure is not the wealth they acquire, it is the person they become in the process. A person who can endure uncertainty, a person who can navigate adversity, a person who can operate with strategy instead of emotion, a person who can choose long-term over impulsive, a person who can stand alone without collapsing, a person who can rise without apology, a person who can build from scarcity and expand into abundance. This is the destiny of the self-made, not to escape lack, but to transcend it. Not to accumulate wealth, but to evolve into the kind of mind that can shape reality. Your past explains you, but it does not define you. Your lack introduced you, but it does not determine you. Your circumstances limit you until your identity outgrows them. If you take nothing else from this audiobook, take this: you are not shaped by what you were born into. You are shaped by what you are willing to become. Rise from lack. Rise from fear. Rise from hesitation. Rise from the identity that the world tried to give you. Rise through discipline, through clarity, through strategy, through purpose. Rise into the version of yourself that the world cannot deny. Rise into the person you were meant to become. Rise into the abundance you are now prepared to hold. Your future is not an inheritance. It is a construction, and you are the architect. This has been Audiobook Mantra. Subscribe for more deep cinematic audiobooks.